And JP, I'll just mention the statistics are remarkable. 80+% of America lays in bed every night feeling that they really aren't accomplishing what they feel they can. This is a very, very sad state. It's directly linked to the epidemics that we see now. I mean, not so much COVID, but specifically things like loneliness, depression, substance abuse, all sorts of psychological issues are pulled through from this feeling of discontentment inside.
Welcome to A State of Readiness, a podcast set as a fireside chat with business leaders to discuss what it takes for a company to be in a state of readiness and become a high-performance organization, with your host, Joseph Paris. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of State of Readiness. I'm your host, Joseph Paris, and my guest today is Marcy Axelrod. Marcy is the award-winning author of On Your Game, to help people succeed in a world designed to knock you off your game. Having first cut her teeth on Wall Street, Marcy is a management consultant with over 25 years of hands-on strategy work at Big Four consulting firms and has worked for or done projects with some of the largest and most respected companies in the world. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in government and behavioral psychology at Cornell University and her MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Welcome, Marcy. Great to have you on my podcast.
Thank you so much, JP.
Yeah, so it's only been a very short time since we met at David Deutsch's Saratoga weekend, aka Camp David.
I know that was such a fabulous weekend with the horse races.
Yeah, the horse race. I mean, Saratoga is just beautiful in August anyway, isn't it?
Yes, my goodness. And the hotel was on the spectacular wildlife preserve with a huge pool. Did you get to swim?
Yeah, I didn't get to swim, but I get to stroll around the golf course a little bit, which is also, beautiful. So yeah, great. And I first met you at the bookstore. One of the events that David had was at the bookstore, and discovered that you had written a book. So we were kindred spirits in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And there's so much overlap also with operational excellence and efficiency and personal achievement, right? The two really go hand in hand.
Yeah. So On Your Game, tell me about your journey with this. I mean, I agree with you, by the way, that, we were both addressing how individuals or companies can become top performers. How can they get on their game? And so I really enjoyed reading your book. But when I was writing my book, I had a substantive editor, and he made it so his job was to make sure that people wanted to read my book. He said, "Joe, I know you got a message to get out, but my job is to make sure people want to read that message." So thinking about your book, when you first sat down, first off, what made you start writing a book?
I appreciate that question. We are going to go back to 2001. I mean, really even 1999. So I was asked by one of the top 5 global high-tech firms to have teams around the world and effectively answer the question, how can we beat our biggest competitor? They wanted the scope to be every industry group and every region. And so at the time, I was one of the leaders of the strategy practice of KPMG Consulting in the Valley. Part of the work to answer their question wasn't just focused on the market and what new customers and existing customers want. It also focused on how can the employees, 100,000 plus people, also be kind of inherently on board to implement what the findings are, right? Because a strategy isn't effective if the people don't achieve in bringing it to life. So the data from that, and it was about 15,000 plus surveys and employees involved, it showed some really striking things, which is effectively that people believe they underachieve. And when you try to get under that about why, there was also a tremendous amount of consistency in what people think they're not doing and what they need to do. So this started to work on me because the output of the project, it did include that. But of course, the executives at the client really wanted to focus more on the top-down strategy work. to start, and then get to the kind of bottoms up employee effectiveness piece of it. So it sat with me. And what I started to do for every engagement after that, for companies like SAP and HP and Motorola and Cisco and Yahoo, on and on and on, I would add an element of survey work to try to get the next data set around this, asking consistent questions. So over time, I could understand, are people better able to achieve, in kind of, 2010 than in 2001? What led to the change, and what can people do who lay in bed every night feeling we underachieve? And JP, I'll just mention, the statistics are remarkable. 80+% of America lays in bed every night feeling that they really aren't accomplishing what they feel they can. This is a very, very sad state. It's directly linked to the epidemics that we see now. I mean, not so much COVID, but specifically things like loneliness, depression, substance abuse, all sorts of psychological issues are pulled through from this feeling of discontentment inside. So that's the backstory about how it started. And those are some of the high level points that are in the book. And I think probably the reason it won 2 awards, I'm a first time author, right? I was like, how did that happen? I think it's because of the robustness of the findings and the time frame, and that it's applied not just to corporate effectiveness, but to individuals.
All right. So let's a common thread in that sharing was that people 80%, I believe, you said believe that they're underachieving. They're not meeting their aspirations and their goals. Now, is that because they've set unrealistic goals? Is it because they're not doing the right things at the right time? Did you drill down to the root causes as to why 80% of these people feel that way? I mean, to me, if I meet all my goals, then I've set my goals too close. You know what I mean? My expectation is that I'm not going to meet all my goals, but I don't lie awake at night thinking, oh, geez, I didn't make my goals today. I mean, because I guess my goals are I have stretch goals, things that I know are going to be challenging to accomplish. And if I don't make it today, that's okay, because there's tomorrow.
Right. You may be living, JP, a more planful, more intentful, and potentially more forgiving life than a lot of people. So the 5 whys, right, the whole root cause assessment that came through from the research, and exactly what people said, I mean, they have an awareness of this, is that they don't take the time to really think through what they want to achieve in any given encounter. And I use that word because we're talking, yes, about the business meetings that are well-structured, well-scoped. You know who the players are. Maybe you've done a version of this 1,000 times, but it also includes that 50 plus, if not 90+% of the rest of our lives that are not so well-scoped and planned. Maybe you know that they're going to happen, right? Maybe you know that you're going to see your partner or child or parent at some point during that day. Maybe you know that you're going to prepare some dinner. Maybe you know that you're going to have some time to recharge. So we might know that these things are likely to occur, but we don't approach them with the same thought and intent. So the words that people use are, I need more time to think. I need more time to get out of my tactical mode and go up to a strategic level of thought about what I want to achieve. And what happens when we kind of go through life with this more default state of just showing up is that sometimes we look back and we think that really didn't go as well as it could have, or as well as I thought it would. Basically, I had a set of implicit expectations and they weren't met. And had I taken some time to think it through and be more planful, this probably would have gone differently. There's a lot there, but I'll stop right there.
No, that's all really good stuff, because I'm reflecting, internalizing what you're saying, and I'm thinking, how do I behave? And I'll tell you, one of the things that I do religiously is I defend my borders. In other words, I will never make a call or take a call that isn't scheduled. If my phone never rings. In fact, my oldest son, he responded to a Facebook questionnaire once that said, "You're kidnapped. Your kidnappers are going to kill you unless you could call somebody and that person won't answer the phone. Who is that person?" And he says, "My father." Okay, because I don't even have it on silent. They're vibrated. It's like nothing. And I find, because I want to be in the moment, like right now I'm having this session with you, we're having a moment together, and we plan this, and, there is a hard border around us. We're in like the cone of silence. We're just talking, you and me, and this is our moment, and nothing's going to interrupt that. And I think that is part and parcel of being successful, is that, you come to your game prepared, and then, make sure that you don't get distracted.
That's exactly right. Distraction is a big part of it. What I discovered from the research is that most people achieve blocks of focused, productive time maybe once or at most twice per month.
Wow.
That's what the data shows. So what they're doing, and so these blocks of time are defined as multi-hour. Okay, so like morning, maybe afternoon. What people are doing is, and we know this well, is we are focusing well for a very short period of time and switching and then trying to come back. What the neuroscience around that shows, and this data on this is well referenced in the book, is that we think we're coming right back. But it turns out that distance between leaving what was maybe our number one area of focus for the morning and coming back, turns out that is 27 minutes.
Yeah.
We don't actually get to the level of depth of thought on that focused task for almost half an hour. So what that means is that there's a huge, huge cost to people not doing what you do and bordering and bounding, really protecting that achievement space with great intent. And really very, very few of us do that.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because, I do a lot of work with manufacturers. Okay. And there's a step in the manufacturing process called setup time. Now, setup time is non-productive. Okay. You're basically taking the time to set up your machine and getting ready for the next process. And the last thing you want to do is have redundant setup times. It takes 15 minutes, whether it's, 15 minutes on a machine or 15 minutes mentally going from one task to another. But during that 15 minutes, nothing's happening that's productive. And if something interrupts the flow, it's going to take you another 15 minutes to re-engage. So I'm looking at, and this is one of the reasons I don't let anybody interrupt me during my day, is that I don't want to have to spend the extra 15 minutes to re-engage the task that I was taken away from.
That's exactly right.
So, I find that I'm very, very productive, and I get a lot of volume and velocity, in my workspace. But I also make sure that, I'm controlling that airspace. I was on a project in Florida. It was a fairly unusual project for me, in that I was pretty much there full time for 2 months. And I got to tell you, my productivity level dropped 50%. Okay. Because I was always waiting for somebody else. I mean, my organization, my flow was so quick that I was done with tasks and always waiting for somebody else to do their piece. And it was just very, very interesting, because, my usual engagements are, like 3 days in a row or 4 days in a row. and then I go on to another site, and then I go, carry on to one project to another. But it was the first time in a long time that I was like there for 2 months solid.
Mhm.
And the speed I had, I never got out of low gear. It was just very,
Right.
very strange.
Perhaps you saw the article. It goes back to the 90s. It was in HBR, and it's called The White Collar Factory.
No,
And
I haven't.
oh, it's fabulous. I'm going to send it to you. And effectively what it explains, and I think this was some of the earlier introduction of thinking about mind space as a factory, but it talks about just what you're talking about. It's the intellectual setup time that we underestimate. And really what we want to do is make it focused setup time at the beginning, right? So what is our intent for a given meeting, both one that's planned, but one that's not planned, right? So how we all to a certain extent relive today, tomorrow. In fact, research shows that over 90% of the decisions that we're making right now, we've already made. 90% of our actions were already taken. So much of our life that we might not expect is predictable. It really, really is, unless we sit down and think about it and design it to be different. Right? We have designed in already so much of what's about to happen. Right? So when you think about changing your level of achievement or connection with an individual or level of engagement or focus in our next hour, our next week, our next year, we need to think about, well, what space have we already set up? What is designed in? What are these constraints? What are the potential points of failure? What are the areas of flexibility that we need to work with? A lot of it are things like, what is the emotional kind of coverage of the event? Do we feel good going in? How does the other person feel? What is the kind of shared set of goals that we can start with to ground a win-win? Are we going to sit across the table because that's adversarial to start out with? Is it right before lunch? Are we likely to be hungry, right? So there are so many things that are kind of emotional, that are social, that are intellectual, that are kind of visceral in our bodies. What level of physical comfort do we walk in with, right? That can enable us to set up well so that we do achieve, right? And that's, I think, what people had in the back of their mind when they said, I didn't take the time to think it through. It isn't just the content. It isn't just a level of presence. It's so rich. It's so much more.
Yeah, but there's a fine line between thinking it all the way through and making a decision, right? I mean, I got to tell you, I don't think things all the way through. I like golf, for instance. I'm not very good at it, but I like it. And I know that when I get to the tee box, I have my hole planned out. I'm going to hit my drive to the 150, hit my 150 to the club to the green, and two putt, and I'm done with par. Well, all of that planning goes away on my backswing. Okay, I'm going to make a connection, and it's going to go wherever it wants to go, it seems, and then I'm going to have to react to that suboptimal outcome and start scrambling. So, I know what I know about me is that I don't need to make the perfect decision, because my second decision is going to dial it in, and my third decision is going to dial it in further. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get forward progress quickly.
Okay, let me try to reflect that back to make sure I've got it. Because you started out by saying you don't really plan. So you aren't really setting yourself up well all the time. Let's say in this example of golf, because what I think Mike Tyson said well, right? He said no fight, no strategy is effective after the first punch.
Right.
Survives the first punch. That's what you're saying about this backswing. So are you saying you're giving yourself permission to not think about it, like not to have more foresight and planning, because you're just going to work with what happens?
That's part of it. I still have the goal Okay, the goal, the notional goal of getting the ball in the hole, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's my notional goal. I don't obsess too much about how I'm going to get there, except notionally. Okay, I have this idea of a plan. I know that I've never seen a plan go according to plan ever. Okay, there's never been a project that's been on time, on budget, and had all the deliverables. All right, I mean, it just doesn't happen. So that means that every decision we're making, we know that it's not going to go according to our expectations.
That's right.
And so what that means is that you have to understand that about yourself and about your surroundings, about all the variables that you don't have control over.
Yes.
And then make incremental decisions that will get you to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Each one measured or building upon the previous. But I think that sometimes people might not have that level of confidence in themselves, and they start obsessing over the details.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that the more details that there are, the more complexity there is. And the more complexity there is, well, complexity kills, right? I mean, elegance is not when you can't add anything more. Elegance is when you can't take anything more away.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. You really hit on something, though, with complexity and perhaps its relationship with confidence. Because what we're talking about is being able to be effective and perform in this unknown environment, right? The backswing is there, the ball goes, and then now we're improvising with what is, right? Our plan went out the door, right? So
Right.
that's what we're talking about now, right? So the question is, how do we perform well when, in essence, our prepared content, our prepared approach is now no longer what we're talking about? We need to interact in the moment.
Yeah. Well, you could either fall forward or fall back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's your thinking regarding how to what do you want to bring that's going to help you perform well in the moment when all your strategies are no longer the path?
Well, I mean, let's take this, COVID, for instance. Okay. Here we are, hopefully at the tail end of this thing. But, people have been conditioned to be so afraid that they can't make a decision. Is it one mask or two masks? Do I need a booster? Do I not need a booster? What if I've already had COVID? Why do I have to have a vaccine? There's just all these different variables and nobody really has the answer. All right. So each one of us is trying to internalize the information that they're getting and making decisions for themselves based on that information, regardless of the quality or origin of that information. We're all in this together, right? And we're just coming up with different conclusions. So I think what you have to, do when you're making these types of decisions, and you're making them in real time, is you have to understand what your capabilities are and what they are not. Yeah. What the capabilities or lack thereof of your network is, your family, your friends, your peers, your colleagues. What is the, to borrow from my book, the readiness of the apparatus and resources at your business in order to support your efforts. And, if you have a level of confidence, I don't want to use the word faith because faith has a little bit of connotations of hope, and hope is not a strategy. But if you have confidence in that which is around you, you're able to make decisions from that imperfect data a little bit more easily, knowing full well, or expecting full well at least, that if the decision is suboptimal, you could fix it in course. So getting back to your book, though, on your game, I mean, I talked about golf a little bit. We talked about its origin. How do you think this book is going to help people? What do you hope they get out of it, even though hope's not a strategy?
Sure. So the whole second half of the book has summaries of the neuroscience that help us to be on our game related to three subjects. First is being with other people. How do they impact us in ways we don't recognize? And how can we prime that? to help us be more effective, not less effective. The second thing is our culture. All of these implicit environments in which we live with all their messages and narratives that we absorb, what is it about the culture that's changing us in ways that we may not find optimal or preferred, that we can then choose to be the impactor on instead of be impacted by? And then the third, which of course you can't leave out, is technology. Right. How are we going to design our worlds to make that our enabler only and not our taskmaster, our controller? I mean, I want to bring up something about what you just said regarding being effective when things are in the unplanned mode, because they really are a lot of the time. The framework that I've built that's well tested, that people seem to be helped by, has two parts. And the left side of it is about being grounded in who we are and why we are. I call it our past and our purpose. And the reason this is so important is because when we're in that unknown space, what we need to do is contextualize it. What's important about this? How does it relate to who I am and what I really feel I'm trying to get done in this life? If you know those two things, you really have a true north that will help you to make the decisions about the vaccine, about how to show up, about whether to wear a mask, right? Those about what to do on your next golf swing, right? So I find that to be a really important aspect that helps people achieve and live on their game, being grounded in our past and our purpose. The right side of the framework talks about being ready. So that's the right now. Like what are you bringing in terms of your preparation and readiness to this moment, to this meeting, to this greeting of my spouse as I come home, right? To this interaction with people when I'm doing errands after work and I'm tired, right? So there's those two parts about being grounded, which help us to improvise well for the unplanned, and then the being ready, which is for all the things that we really can plan for, which I think is much more than we realize, because as I said, so much of what we're doing each day is actually repetitive.
Right. So what happens if you get knocked off your game?
You back up and you take time to think about it. A lot of people at this point are mired in emotion. That can be difficult, right? So what you want to do is have that meta awareness that's spoken about by professors like Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin. He's actually the father of what we now call contemplative neuroscience, which is how to use our brains to really use awareness to perform well. And what he talks about is have an awareness of what you're dealing with when you're knocked off your game. So that feeling that we underachieve, that we kind of let ripple and fibrillate, if you will, throughout our days, that kind of takes our energy and focus away. Notice it from just a state of awareness, and then say, okay, now I'm in the driver's seat. I'm in control. What am I going to do? And then you can really start the more intellectual and cognitive part of the planning, because the more body, like embodied and visceral part of it that pulls us away from our effectiveness is now befriended, as opposed to something we bump up against.
Right. So, I was working on a project, and the owner of the company was in task overload. Okay. His company was in deep trouble. And I, instead of working on his business, he was working in his business. Okay. What I mean by that is, the company was in, like, I can't stress it enough. It was right on the brink. And, he's out there on the shop floor, sorting washers and nuts and bolts, you know what I mean? Instead of and the only thing I could think of, and, you probably know people that have been divorced. When people become divorced, guys will start, training for triathlons, or women will train for triathlons. Or I know this one woman, she obsessed over the cleanliness of her house, that it could be an operating theater. All right. And I think that when people are in this task overload, when they're off their game so far, that they revert to things that they have 100% control over. You know what I mean? So the gentleman, sorting nuts and bolts, his world was very, very tiny at that point. But he had complete control over it. He commanded that. And the same with, people training for the triathlon. But it's almost always when they face some sort of, existential threat, that they revert to this. And that's what when I think about being knocked off our game, everybody's got a bad day, right? I mean, you just, brush yourself off, you get ready for the next day and re-engage. But sometimes you get knocked off so far off your game that you're in an abyss that it's virtually impossible to crawl out of. What can a person do in order to knock themselves off of being off of their game to get back in the game?
Right. Yeah. So that's a very important question. When you're so far knocked off, chances are you feel your world is three things, right? Or what is happening to you is three things. It's personal, it's pervasive, and it's permanent, right? That's when you feel stuck and you're sitting there obsessively cleaning your house or, counting nuts and bolts. The first thing to do is to broaden your world and to recognize what you're doing. It's not happening to you. It's not solely about you. It's not going to go on forever. And it's something where you can take back agency and volition. The way that you do this is you crack open your world and you look outside, right? So maybe you speak to someone and ask for help. You get a different perspective. At a minimum, you take out a piece of paper and you think, what have I done in the past that I'm not doing now? What have I stopped that helped before? Reflecting on the past is so useful because it's available to us. It doesn't mean we need to take the extra effort of going out, doing a Google search, right? Because it's already in us and therefore it's safe. So it's easier. So you can start with thinking about what did I stop that maybe is causing issues? And then from there, you can take those extra steps of reaching out. Maybe it's something as simple as I said, a Google search. Maybe it then leads to speaking to people, but it's tiny, tiny steps. And the book actually talks about a bunch of research about the effectiveness of really small steps. There was both research at Harvard and at Stanford that looked at achieving goals. And one specific example was on losing weight, losing 40 pounds, big goal, really hard, right? And what they found is that the people who were focused on 2 pounds, that's it. Let's focus on 2 at a time. Those people were overwhelmingly more effective than the people who sat with a big goal of like, how in the world do I fix this?
Yeah.
Now here's a new one.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I want to share something that with you may or may not know that the single biggest revenue day for fitness centers is the first business day after New Year's.
I'm sure. Right? Okay.
And this is, and it's really funny because, I know the senior execs at Planet Fitness. All right. And they mentioned that everybody, they want to lose that 10 or 20 pounds by Easter or by, spring break or whatever it is. And, they go and they work out, like they give up everything. They work out 2-3 hours a day. And at the end of the week, they've might have gained a pound. Okay. Because they haven't changed their eating habits. Now their body is more hungry and they actually are eating more. And, after 2 or 3 weeks, they've sacrificed everything else. I mean, whatever they used to do 2 or 3 hours a day, they're now doing this. So whatever they used to do is put on the back burner. And they get frustrated and they quit. All right. So what's more important, losing the 20 pounds by Easter or losing the 20 pounds? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's actually neither. What's more important is having a practice that's sustainable that you do every day. And the way that you do this is you make the goal so ridiculously simple that you basically trip over it getting out of bed each day, right?
Yeah.
1 push-up, one, one push-up. So you get out of bed, you don't need to go do anything. You can do it before you brush your teeth. But you're down on your hands. And even if you don't do the push-up, guess what? You got 2 seconds of plank.
Yeah.
Right? The one
That's right.
That's what you do.
I could plank for 2 seconds.
Right. And now you've got this habit. You get out of bed, you stand up, and then you look down and you're like, okay, I'm going to go put my hands on the floor right now.
Yeah.
And you go and you do it. And then by the time you brush your teeth, I mean, man, look what you've achieved. And you feel great. And as we all know, achievement is a spiral that kind of keeps giving to itself. It pulls you up. There's this great video by, oh goodness, I'm going to think of his name. He's a general, and it's called Make Your Bed. And he trained Navy SEALs. And what he shows is these people swimming in the dark and literally shark-infested waters. And he talks about how hard it is to achieve the status of Navy SEAL. But his point is, you want to get there, you make your bed. Like effectively, you get up, you achieve something immediately, and then it feeds the next. So what the Stanford and Harvard studies on small steps showed is that after you've done your 2 pounds, 2 pounds, 2 pounds, once you get to 20, once you get to half that goal, you actually widen your lens and you say, now I can do 40. So you re-anchor yourself, right? So there's a process that's proven to be effective here, where you start out with the very, very small so that you know that you can do it. And then after you've got, like, maybe you go from the 1 push-up then to 3, you stay at 3 for a week, then you go to 5. Once you're at 10, you can then say, now I'm ready to do my 20 push-ups, right? And that's how the process works.
Very good. Well, listen, Marcy, I think that we're nearing the end of our session here. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. Very, very insightful. I think that everybody could benefit from the insights contained in your book, On Your Game. But we have a couple of speed questions that I like to ask at the end, just to get into a little insight into you as a person. The first question I'm going to ask you is, who's the one person that you look up to the most, and why?
There are so many. If I give you one, I'm going to say Benjamin Franklin, who wrote The 13 Points of Moral Perfection. I read it at a very young and impressionable age, and it really stuck with me. Number one, because he actually had a belief that people are perfectible, which is debatable, but it impacted me. And some of what his specific points are, right? Eat not to excess, drink not to dullness, give everything its time, both in, give everything its place, both in time and in space. So those little things really impacted me. So Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin. So this is one that's sometimes unscripted, but in your life, if you had one do-over, what would it be and why? What would you do different?
Definitely. So I went to business school after Wall Street, and my real passion is neuroscience and psychology. That background is really what led me to be tremendously effective, both on Wall Street and in management consulting, because I was so focused on the customer, their mind, their decision-making. But, looking back, PhD in psychology or neuroscience, specifically the positive side of it, right? Achievement, not depression, right? Right. That's always kind of in the back of my mind, is what would that path be?
Yeah, but sometimes you have to deal with depression in order to get to achievement, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, got to get out of our own way. So let's see here. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
That everyone has the same, we're all the same. We have the same needs. Number one, we want to be fully accepted for who we are. And number two, we all just put on our pants one leg at a time every day, be you kind of the Shah or the janitor or the barista, we're all the same. And we need to look at people for what happened perhaps to them, not for how they're actually behaving.
Yeah. We all don't, nobody knows, the burden that others carry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's recognize we all deserve equal love and support.
Amen to that. Well, Marcy, thank you very much for joining me today on my podcast. You've been an outstanding guest, a lot of wisdom in this, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
JP, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Yes, take care.
Thank you for listening to State of Readiness. You can discover more episodes and learn about the book written by Joseph Paris of the same title at www.state-of-readiness.com. You can learn more about Joseph Paris at www.josephparis.me/card.